So I think I'd say to Boris, as a politician, you're an extremely good journalist.
It's Matt Cholly on Times Radio in the Cross Keys pub in the City of London. It's a Wetherspoons pub. And I'm here with Sir Tim Martin, the man who founded the chain back in 1979.
Long time ago, Matt.
I've come to the pub at lunchtime, Tim, and we're drinking coffee.
I know.
Is the lunchtime pint dead?
No, but when you get to my age, you've got to slow down a bit.
I'm very disappointed. So how do you think, there are a lot of people in here, are as many people, is the lunchtime pint still a thing?
It's probably, I watched an excerpt from Smiley's People with Alec Guinness in 1982, and they were having a meeting in MI5 or whatever it was, and they were drinking whiskey and smoking cigarettes. I think it's less of it. It's changed imperceptibly over the years, but a lot of people still do have a pint at lunchtime, but it's not so much part of the culture, especially among people like journalists who are the most notorious boozers.
So let's talk about then, Wetherspoons is doing very well. You know, the rest of the high street seems to be being hollowed out with shops and things going. Pre-tax profits up eightfold. But overall, we hear about pubs going under all the time, particularly since the pandemic, 29 closing every week. What are you doing differently? You've had to shut some pubs as well, but how are you managed to buck that trend?
It's very difficult to say, and I think I've always described it as 1,000 components of a BMW. It's no one thing. But obviously our prices are lower, which must mean we're efficient operators. Our pubs are maybe a bit bigger, and we've got far longer staying pub managers and kitchen managers. So like to think we got better employment policies. And
is the clientele, the sort of people who go to the pub, changing? We hear a lot about, particularly people work from home. Is it an older crowd now, a Gen Z coming in for their non-alcoholic spritzers? Are you getting the next generation into the pub, or are they staying at home looking at their phones?
I think Wetherspoon pubs have always attracted a broad church, and so I think we're attracting everyone. It's very difficult to tell if there's less of some and more than others. After the pandemic ended, it took older people much longer to come back out. Young people were more in evidence then. But I would say everyone's out now, more or less, perhaps minding their money more and coming less frequently than they would.
And what about opening hours? Because there's been a lot of talk in recent weeks, people, particularly in London, but I think this is true in lots of towns and cities. The nightlife seems to be dying out. London, a 24-hour city, you struggle to get a drink after 10 o'clock. Are you looking at your hours?
No, we're staying open the hours we always have. It's very difficult to understand what's happened, because immediately after the lockdowns ended, young people were out a lot, but people running nightclubs or late bars have said now it's got very, very tough. And I can't understand why, because young people like to dance, get out there, meet their partners, etc.
And one of the problems we've heard a lot about is hospitality businesses, pubs, restaurants, clubs, struggling to find people to work in them. High labour costs, labour shortages. Is that something that's affected you?
We've been less affected than most, so we've been fully staffed the whole time. It was very difficult to recruit people immediately after the lockdown. I think I don't think they were scared of going out. I think we're much more creatures of habit than we realise. If we stay in our house for a couple of years, if you then open the door and say, right, venture out, we get a bit frightened, or just takes us a long time to change. But I think it has to be remembered that we've got the lowest ever unemployment in the UK's history, certainly in my lifetime, which doesn't fit with the general narrative about the economic climate at the moment. It's very odd, and I don't think anyone really understands it.
One of the things I remember, you backed Brexit, and we'll come on to the broader question of Brexit later, but about a year after the referendum, you were up in front of a House of Lords committee, and you were concerned about finding the staff to work. There were labour shortages then, and you got quite a lot of criticism back then for saying, well, you're the one who wanted to bring up the drawbridge, and now you're complaining there aren't Europeans to come and work in your pubs. How's that panned out since then?
That's not quite right, Matt. What I said is that we're fully staffed in our
Yeah.
pubs, and there's nothing whatsoever to prevent the country from doing the same as the Australians do with the Kiwis, or we do with the Irish, and saying that we provide visas for Eastern Europeans or Europeans generally. Nothing whatsoever to stop us doing that as a country ruling itself. You don't need the EU to do it. And I said I think that would have been a reasonable thing for us to do based on proximity, the Australian and the Irish example. I said you couldn't do it so easily with India or China from a pragmatic point of view, because they've got 1.x billion people in each country, and it just isn't feasible.
But I suppose lots of people voted for Brexit because they wanted to reduce the number of people coming here, not make it easier for people to come here. And actually what we've seen since Brexit is the numbers have gone through the roof, both legal and illegal.
Yeah, well, that's right, which is another issue really as to what I've always thought we need. As I said to the House of Lords Committee, successful economies need a gradually increasing population, and but not everyone agrees with that proposition, of course. So it's a complex area. It's a very complex. We rely for our freedom really for the last 100 years on North America, and its population has gone from 100 million in 1900 to a third of a billion today, and it's only because it's got such a big population and its GDP per capita has risen astronomically as well, that it's able to, in the Cold War and the First World War, Second World War, to stand shoulder to shoulder with us. Without that, we have been subject to authoritarian regimes. So we rely on a country which has had high levels of immigration. It's a complex area.
How many staff have you got, and how many of those are from outside the UK?
We've got 42,000 staff. We haven't got a survey to say how many. We did a mini survey a while ago, and it's relatively low percentage overall in the company, under 10%. If you took this pub in the City of London, it would be much higher.
But it's different in different parts of the country.
Yeah.
In terms of your position in politics, you're running pubs, you've got a big constituency of people who come in here all the time. There's the glossy magazines on there which have got your views on politics. You're quite a powerful man in politics, aren't you?
Well, funnily enough, until I was 62, I almost never commented on politics at all. So I think I'm a sort of single issue guy really, and my main theory in life is that democracy is essential for the future of the world. And so when it came to Brexit, there's a definite democratic deficit in the EU. You don't vote for the president. So I felt it was better to revert to the previous democratic system. So, but apart from that, I never said when Tony Blair was in power, I think we'd be better off with whoever it was in opposition at the time.
So how do you feel then, since we took back control, how do you feel like the people we've democratically elected have got on running the country?
I mean, it could hardly have been more chaotic in many respects. But I think I think democracy's always chaotic. Look at America, and people are crowding at the borders to try and get in from authoritarian countries to North America, in spite of what we perceive as Biden against Trump. How could that possibly have happened? But it's a high-class problem because it's democracy. So it's chaotic. I think it was particularly chaotic at certain episodes in the last few years. But I think that's democracy, and we get too down on it. As I said, lowest ever unemployment at the moment. Something's going right.
Do you see, when you see politicians, going to pubs, Boris Johnson used to go to pubs, Nigel Farage is never without a pint glass in his hand. Do you think that's convincing?
Nigel's a genuine boozer. I'm not sure about Boris. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I wish Rishi Sunak's teetotal, but he still feels the need to go to a pub and
He
full of
does,
pint.
actually. Yeah, you're right.
What do you make of that?
Well, I think, politics is a job, isn't it? And I suppose what they have to do is get votes, and pubs are part of the constituency. So I can understand that. It's if you want to get elected Prime Minister, Matt, You've got to get in the old boozer.
So you said Nigel Farage is a proper boozer. He called you a Brexit legend. He must have asked you to stand for one of his parties. Is he trying to get you into politics?
Not him personally, but I'm sure I could. Running the business, I think they know it's impossible. I'm full-time working in the company. It's been a tough few years, and paraphrasing Muhammad Ali, if I even dream of becoming a politician, I better wake up and apologise.
But they must all want you. They must be courting your vote the whole time.
Not much really. I think they know that prior to the referendum, I wasn't involved. It was quite funny because today our results came out, and it was March 2016. I went to see Ian King on Sky News. I've just seen today, and he said, "How are you going to vote?" I said, "Well, I'm going to leave. Vote leave." And that's the first time I'd ever said it. So I hadn't been a UKIPper or any of that sort of stuff.
Last year you said you were considering voting Labour. What are you thinking today?
Did I say that? Yeah, I mean, I'm an agnostic now. I'm not going to, I'm going to keep stum on political parties. That's my approach to life. I'm getting on a bit. I'm running a pub company, and it's been a turbulent few years.
Does that mean there'll be less of the sort of overtly political stuff in the magazines?
I think I can take an issue and say, as I've done, say people shouldn't be cancelled. There was an article in the Times by Matthew Syed, which I printed in the magazine, and he was saying how people are being tried by social media and how frightening it is. And I think that's a really big issue for us. But it's not party political, I don't think. But it's a big issue.
Do you worry about being cancelled?
No. Because I'm so groovy. Why is everyone laughing? It's impossible to cancel me. No, I mean, I wouldn't like to be cancelled, I suppose, but I think I'm quite lucky in a way, because we've got a pub company. In a sense, we've got a voice. If we had a widget factory, I don't think you have, but if you run pubs and you've got a view, you can say it. They say no politics in pubs, but people are always debating issues.
So I introduced you at the beginning, Sir Tim Martin. You got a knighthood. There was a bit of sniffiness about that. Why? A lot
of people thought it brought the honour system into disrepute, which I can understand.
But you are a successful businessman. Yeah. You employ thousands of people. People come into your pubs the whole time. Is it a snobbish thing? Because you back Brexit and because you serve cheap drinks to people who want a cheap drink, is it a snobbish thing?
It's not for everyone, and I can sort of understand people saying, if they're a Remainer, for example, that adopting that type of attitude. I mean, Brexit is very divisive, but is it snobbish? A bit, sometimes, but not always. We actually, weirdly enough, we got some stats the other day. People who drink in our pubs are above average for the areas in which we trade and on the high street. I don't understand that, but there you are. Maybe that's why they're better off.
If you stepped back a bit from politics, did you find Remainers refusing to come into your pubs? Did it affect you at all?
Not perceptibly. So in the years running up to the pandemic, our sales increased every year. There were three and a half years, I think, after the referendum. So people, I think the referendum, until we actually left anyway, the referendum was put out there as something, a constitutional issue that we were required to debate. And so I think people subconsciously or consciously accepted that. But when we actually left, I think people got a bit angry. They didn't think it was for real, until we actually did.
Given all of the anger, abuse, whether it's on social media or in the papers or whatever that you got, do you regret dipping your toe into politics?
No, I think that for humanity to survive, we need democracy everywhere in the world, and so I think it was reasonable to articulate the arguments in the way not only I did, everyone else did. I think I got into trouble because there were plenty of people who supported Remain, who were running big businesses, and that was the mainstream, but I was sort of on the outside, really.
Did you think, because the government's own figures show the economy is now smaller as a result of Brexit, lots of the things that people warned about came true. Given where we are, and it's hard, I know, because you've got the pandemic in the middle of it, but what is it, 8 years on now? Do you think it was worth it? If all that energy had been put, government energy, business energy, had just been put into the economy?
I think if you're a Remainer, you're never going to believe that the economy now is doing as well as it would have done if we'd stayed in. Well, I think it's true. A famous Remainer said only last week that since the referendum, we've outgrown the three largest European economies. It was the Chancellor of the Exchequer. I assumed that he got his figures from the Treasury. So we've chugged along okay, and I don't think there's much difference. The former head of the Bank of England, Mervyn King, said during the referendum he thought people for and against Brexit exaggerated their cases and it didn't make as much difference as had been said. There's a guy called Robert Toombs, a professor at Cambridge University, who said that the UK has marched in lockstep with the United States of America's economy since 1945, and in or out of the EU. So I think things get a bit exaggerated.
And figures can be used to say anything. You backed Boris because of Brexit. Would you like to see him come back?
I think I'd say to Boris, as a politician, you're an extremely good journalist. I don't think Boris is the sort of guy that can sit round a table and debate issues and come out with sensible solutions with a team behind him, having sat there for a few hours. And essentially, if you're a politician or running a business, that's what you've got to do. Nothing against Boris, amusing character, but I don't think that's his forte.
Do you think you could do a better job as
Yes.
PM? And what about the current crop? You've got Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer, Ed Davey, Humza Yousaf. Which one would you like to go to the pub with?
I wouldn't mind going to the pub with any of them. It'd have to be a coffee with Rishi, you tell me.
Yeah,
but he's an engaging guy. Keir Starmer, I'm sure happy to have a pint with him. Ed Davey, I don't know so much, but I'm sure he's a reasonable enough man.
What's your drink of choice?
Abbott Ale.
Abbott Ale.
And followed by a glass or two of Merlot.
Very good.
Which I'll be going to have in a while.
Well, I know I'm just on the coffee here. I wanted to ask you about the move, the more and more alcohol-free drinks, and that sort of shift that seems to happen, particularly generationally. Have you seen that reflected in what you're selling?
Yeah, I mean, over the years, yes. I mean, when we floated on the stock market 30 years ago, 5% of our sales were food. Now it's about 38%. And with that comes quite a lot of non-alcoholic drinks. But the number one draft product, sacrilegiously in our pubs, is cola. I won't mention the brand name. That's the draft product. And we sell more coffee and tea than we do cola. So it's really people concentrate on the non-alcoholic beers, but they're a very tiny percentage.
Could you ever imagine a Wetherspoons that was all non-alcohol?
No. That you cross the Rubicon at that point.
Have you been following this thing about the crooked house? You've taken over. We're sitting in a lovely old building here. Yeah. Loads of, in lots of towns and cities across the country, old buildings have been brought back into use by Wetherspoons. This crooked house pub was knocked down. Would you ever think about taking that over?
When I see something like that, I'm quite tempted. I saw a railway station somewhere which was disused. It might have been the oldest railway station in the UK, and I was tempted to go to this small village, but I think the non-executive directors would say, let's keep it commercial, Tim. But yeah, we all love restoration of an old building if we possibly can do it.
One question I do have to ask you, and actually this doesn't apply here, but often you're in lovely old buildings that you've done up lovingly, and yet the carpets are quite sticky, Tim. Why are the carpets sometimes a bit sticky in a Wetherspoons.
Yeah, I've not noticed that, but if they
If
are,
you're visiting, they probably whip the Hoover out first.
if they are, maybe it's Billy Connolly said the Queen thought everywhere smelt of fresh paint.
Yeah.
So maybe guys go around with Hoovers before I turn up in the pub. If the carpets are sticky, they shouldn't be, and we need to sort it. And
I'll let you know the next time.
Next time you let me know.